Welcome to Stoic Listener. Today we will dive into The Overthinking Cure by Trenton, a brutally honest, no-nonsense guide to breaking free from the mental prison of overthinking. If you're tired of lying awake at night, stuck in endless loops of worry, regret, and self-doubt, this book is your wake-up call. Overthinking isn't harmless. It's a silent thief that robs you of your time, energy, and peace of mind. And worst of all, it convinces you that you're being productive while it drags you deeper into stress and indecision. Trenton strips away the fluff and hands you tools, simple, actionable steps that disrupt rumination and silence the noise. You learn why your mind clings to anxiety, why you get stuck in loops of what-ifs, and how to break free before it spirals out of control. This isn't about theory or overcomplicated psychology. It's about cutting through the fog, taking back control, and rewiring your brain for clarity, confidence, and calm action. By the end of this journey, you'll be armed with a toolkit to stop overthinking code. Because thinking harder rarely solves the problem. Thinking differently does. Let's dive in. Overthinking is one of the most dangerous mental traps we fall into. And the worst part is, it often disguises itself as being careful or responsible. But don't be fooled. Overthinking is a silent killer, working quietly behind the scenes while it wrecks your mental, emotional, and even physical health. It's a thief that steals your time, energy, and joy, leaving you drained and stuck. You start replaying mistakes like a broken film reel. Conversations you had days, months, even years ago loop in your head. You dissect every word you said, every tone of voice, every expression you or someone else made. You obsess over missed opportunities, regrets, or future disasters that haven't even happened and may never happen. What if you said the wrong thing? What if they didn't really mean what they said? What if you make the wrong choice tomorrow? These questions eat away at you, growing louder and louder as you try to live your day-to-day life. What could have been a simple decision or a fleeting moment becomes a never-ending saga in your mind. The cost of this endless mental chatter? It's devastating. You lose sleep because your brain won't shut up. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the hours pass as you mentally rehearse situations that don't matter anymore or obsess about worst-case scenarios. Your body stays tense, your stomach knots, and even when you manage to drift off, you wake up more exhausted than before. Then comes decision paralysis, the inability to act. Simple choices turn into paralyzing dilemmas. Something as basic as sending an email, making a phone call, or choosing between two options becomes a heavy burden. You delay action in hopes of finding the perfect answer, but the perfect answer never comes. The more you think, the harder it becomes to make a move, and the more powerless you feel. You stay stuck in limbo, spinning your wheels while life passes you by. Stress becomes your baseline state. Overthinking keeps your body in constant fight-or-flight mode. Your mind mistakes imagined threats for real ones, and your nervous system reacts accordingly. You live with elevated cortisol levels, shallow breathing, tight muscles, and a nagging sense of dread. This stress isn't fleeting. It piles up over days, weeks, and years, taking a toll on your physical health, your relationships, and your sense of self-worth. Here's the cruel irony. Overthinking doesn't solve a damn thing. You might convince yourself that if you just think a little harder, if you just analyze one more angle, you'll finally gain control and eliminate uncertainty. But that's a lie. The more you overthink, the worse you feel, and the less clear everything becomes. Overthinking magnifies your fears and creates problems that weren't even there to begin with. A small issue snowballs into a catastrophe inside your head. You find yourself stuck in a storm of doubt and negativity. And worst of all, you become a prisoner of your own mind. You lose touch with the present moment, with opportunities right in front of you, because you're too busy living inside your head. Your creativity, your spontaneity, your confidence, they all fade under the weight of constant analysis and self-criticism. Trenton makes it brutally clear. If you don't step in and disrupt this pattern, you're choosing a life of self-sabotage. Overthinking isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. It kills momentum, erodes happiness, and feeds anxiety until it becomes your default mode of living. Overthinking is the slow, quiet killer of dreams, relationships, and mental peace. Left unchecked, it becomes a way of life where you're always trapped in your mind, second-guessing yourself, avoiding risks, and missing out on everything that makes life worth living. Overthinking is like a machine with gears that lock into place the second a trigger occurs. It doesn't happen by accident. It follows a pattern, a mechanical process that becomes second nature if left unchecked. It starts with a single spark, something seemingly harmless, a comment someone made, a look you received, a deadline approaching. This is the trigger. The moment it hits, your mind reacts and latches onto it like a dog with a bone. From there, it moves fast. The trigger breeds a thought. Maybe it's simple at first. Did I sound foolish in that meeting? Or what if I don't finish this project on time? But that single thought is never enough. It doesn't stay still. Instead, it starts spinning, growing, morphing into something larger and more menacing. You begin to pick apart every word you said in that meeting or envision every possible way the project could fail. You convince yourself you've missed something crucial or made a catastrophic mistake. And just like that, you fall into rumination. Now you're stuck. This is the loop's gravitational pull, the endless mental replays, the circular reasoning, the I should have and what if traps. You run scenarios over and over in your head like a malfunctioning simulator, hoping to find some relief or certainty, but it only buries you deeper. Every time you revisit the situation, the anxiety intensifies. As this wheel keeps turning, you enter the anxiety loop, the final and most damaging phase. The longer you ruminate, the more anxious you become. Anxiety, in turn, feeds more thoughts that feel urgent, threatening, and emotionally charged. It creates a vicious feedback loop where the fear of something going wrong produces even more reasons to worry. Your body feels it too: tight chest, racing heartbeat, shallow breathing. You are now physically and mentally trapped. This entire cycle is fueled by two insidious culprits: fear of the unknown and perfectionism. The unknown terrifies you. Your brain despises uncertainty, so it overthinks to fill in the gaps with imagined scenarios, even if they're negative. It prefers bad news over no news because at least bad news feels predictable. Perfectionism makes it worse by convincing you that every decision, every action must be flawless. Anything less than perfect feels like failure. And so you obsess endlessly over every small choice. Nick Trenton lays it bare. Self-doubt is the fuel that keeps this engine running. When you don't trust yourself, when you question your instincts and abilities, every decision feels like a gamble you're destined to lose. You seek certainty through thought, but certainty is a mirage. The more you chase it, the further it runs. Overthinking isn't about being cautious or prepared, it's about being trapped by your own insecurities. The trigger sparks it. The thought invites you in, rumination locks the door, and anxiety keeps you chained there. The longer you stay inside this loop, the more natural it starts to feel. It becomes the air you breathe, the lens you see the world through. But here's the hidden truth Trenton reveals: the loop isn't inevitable. It only survives when you feed it. The second you learn to break the chain between trigger and thought and rumination, you start to weaken its hold on you. The first step is seeing this pattern for what it is: a reflex, not reality. The brutal truth is that we can't stop overthinking because deep down, it gives us a false sense of control. When life feels chaotic or uncertain, overthinking steps in as a counterfeit solution. It whispers, if you just think harder, you'll figure it out. You'll stay safe. We convince ourselves that by endlessly analyzing every possibility, we can predict the future, avoid mistakes, and guarantee success. But this is an illusion. Overthinking feels like control, but in reality, It's just anxiety dressed up as strategy. You tell yourself that worrying is productive, that replaying conversations or rehearsing scenarios will somehow make you sharper, more prepared, more in control. But it doesn't. It exhausts you and feeds your fear. Instead of solving problems, you end up stuck in an endless loop of what if and should I? Questions with no clear answers because you're trying to prepare for 100 outcomes that may never happen. Two major culprits trap you here: FOMO and FOBO. FOMO, fear of missing out, makes you believe that every opportunity is crucial and that missing even one could ruin everything. You scroll through social media, hear about other successes, or spot alternative choices, and suddenly you're gripped by the idea that you're falling behind or making the wrong choice. Your mind panics and starts scanning every path you could have taken. This fuels more worry, more comparison, and more mental noise. Then comes FOBO, fear of better options. The belief that no matter what choice you make, there's always a better one lurking out there. This paralyzes decision-making. You hesitate, waffle, and delay because you're terrified of committing to a path that isn't perfect. You think, what if I choose A, but B would have made me happier? What if C is even better, and I haven't even considered it yet? This fear of imperfection keeps you locked in indecision, wasting time and draining your confidence. Nick Trenton describes this perfectly. It's mental quicksand. The more you fight it, the more you overanalyze, question, and obsess, the deeper you sink. Every second you spend overthinking tightens the grip, making it harder to break free. Like quicksand, the struggle only accelerates your descent. Instead of giving you mastery over your life, overthinking enslaves you to fear. You become trapped in a cycle where worrying feels like action, even though you're getting nowhere. It's like rocking in a chair. Lots of motion, zero progress. The mind tricks you into believing you're solving problems when, in truth, you're just circling the drain. Even worse, overthinking chips away at your self-trust. The more you indulge in it, the less you trust your own instincts and decisions. You become dependent on constant mental rehearsal instead of learning to act, adjust, and move forward. Overthinking teaches you to fear mistakes, when mistakes are often the very fuel you need to grow. Trenton doesn't sugarcoat it. This habit steals your power. The deeper you sink, the harder it becomes to listen to your intuition or take decisive action. You lose hours, days, sometimes years caught in the mental fog, believing that thinking more will eventually give you clarity. But clarity comes from action, not endless thought. The hard truth is, overthinking is your mind's desperate attempt to eliminate uncertainty in a world where uncertainty is unavoidable. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you can start breaking the chains. This chapter is where the rubber meets the road. Nick Trenton stops diagnosing the problem and hands you the tools to fight back. A set of practical, no-nonsense tactics to smash the overthinking cycle and get moving. First up, the 5-second rule. This simple yet brutally effective method comes down to interrupting the moment you begin spiraling. The second you notice yourself slipping into hesitation or rumination, count backward from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then act. No debating, no overanalyzing, no internal committee meeting. Just move. Call the person, send the email, make the choice. This tactic forces you to bypass the endless debate stage and launches you into action before fear and doubt can sink their claws in. It's like flipping a switch that wakes up your brain's decision-making system and says, "We're doing this now." Trenton emphasizes that your window to act is small. If you don't make a move within about 5 seconds, your mind will default back into overthinking mode. The 5-second rule slams the door on hesitation and trains you to trust your instincts, even if the situation feels uncomfortable. Next, he introduces the power of decision deadlines. If you let a decision drag on forever, your mind will milk every second for more anxiety. Trenton's solution? Set firm, non-negotiable limits. Give yourself a specific amount of time to consider your options, whether it's 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days, and then make the call. No extensions, no stalling. For example, you might say, I have 30 minutes to decide where to eat, or I'll choose my next career step by Friday at noon. By creating a ticking clock, you engage your brain's natural urgency and cut off the luxury of endless ruminating. This tactic leans on what behavioral psychologists know well: artificial constraints create clarity. They push you to weigh what truly matters instead of drowning in analysis paralysis. Then comes the game changer, the good enough mindset. Perfectionism is gasoline on the overthinking fire. Trenton tells it straight: if you keep searching for the perfect decision, you'll end up making none. The good enough mindset is about shifting your focus from flawless execution to sufficient progress. It's permission to move forward even if things aren't 100% ideal. Instead of agonizing over finding the perfect gym routine, relationship choice, or job offer, you choose what meets your key criteria and move forward. You'll refine and improve as you go. But first, you must escape the chokehold of perfectionism. Trenton reminds you, done is better than perfect, because done means momentum, and momentum means freedom from the cycle. And if you're familiar with Daniel Kahneman's work, you'll see how all these tactics force your system to the slow, deliberate part of your mind to take the wheel. When you're stuck in System 1's autopilot, overthinking, emotional reactions, fear, you need sharp tools to shock your mind into deliberate action. The 5-second rule, decision deadlines, and the good enough mindset are exactly that. They make system to step up and override the knee-jerk reactions. Each tool is like a crowbar, prying you out of the rut. Instead of letting rumination run the show, these methods create interruption points, small but powerful moments where you can say, I choose action over paralysis. Trenton is clear. Overthinking isn't solved by more thinking, it's solved by movement. Even imperfect steps forward disrupt the cycle and create space for confidence to grow. Modern life is a battleground of distractions. Everywhere you turn, phones lighting up with notifications, inboxes overflowing, social feeds constantly pulling you into comparison traps. Your brain is under siege. In Chapter 5, Distraction Detox, Trenton drives home a harsh but liberating truth. Your overthinking is constantly being fueled by this noise. The more stimuli you feed your brain, the more anxious chatter it produces. Trenton describes it as mental pollution. Every ping, every swipe, every dopamine hit from a like or a comment trains your mind to be restless and overstimulated. The side effect? Your brain never gets a chance to breathe, let alone to think clearly or calmly. It's no wonder overthinking feels like a default setting. You're living in a storm. Step 1, Trenton says, is a detox. But not just any detox. He's not talking about some vague notion of being more mindful. He's calling for a full-on cutback on the constant digital and sensory bombardment. You need to reclaim your focus before you can escape the prison of overthinking. The first target? Mindless scrolling. It's the silent thief of mental bandwidth. Trenton explains how every time you pick up your phone to scroll through news feeds or binge content, you're doing two things: training your brain to crave shallow stimulation, giving it zero space to process or rest. He makes a powerful point. When your brain is overstimulated, it becomes hyperactive even when there's no external input. That's why you ruminate in bed or obsess over conversations hours after they end. Your brain has been conditioned to constantly jump from thought to thought without ever hitting pause. The detox isn't about going off the grid forever. It's about taking back control. Trenton encourages you to start simple. Designate no phone times during your day, at meals, before bed, first thing in the morning. Turn off non-essential notifications. Schedule focused, device-free time where you just let your mind idle or engage in real-life activities, reading, walking, having face-to-face conversations. Trenton also suggests doing regular mini detox. Even 30 to 60 minutes a day without distractions can begin rewiring your mind to settle, reset, and finally quiet the background noise that fuels overthinking. He links this detox directly to reducing anxiety and mental clutter. When your attention isn't constantly hijacked, your brain naturally becomes more resilient and less prone to spiraling thoughts. It can handle uncertainty better, process emotions more calmly, and approach situations with sharper clarity. But Trenton warns, the detox will be uncomfortable at first. Withdrawal symptoms like boredom, restlessness, or FOMO will surface. However, pushing through those early phases is essential because on the other side is mental stillness, the fertile ground where confidence, problem-solving, and peace of mind can grow. Distraction isn't just wasting your time, Trenton says, it's keeping you locked inside your own head, stuck in loops of rumination. The detox is your way out. Overthinking is like a time machine. You're either spiraling about something that happened or freaking out over what might happen. But rarely, if ever, are you fully in the present. That's the core message of Chapter 6, Mindfulness and Presence. Trenton draws a clear line. Overthinking thrives on time-traveling thoughts, but mindfulness is your anchor to the now. Trenton opens the chapter by debunking a myth. Mindfulness isn't about sitting cross-legged for hours or chanting mantras in a remote monastery. It's about training your brain to stop drifting into the past or future and instead plant itself firmly in the present moment where overthinking can't survive. He gets practical fast. The first tool? Deep breathing. And no, this isn't just take a deep breath and calm down. Trenton explains the science. Controlled breathing slows your heart rate, signals safety to your nervous system, and physically calms your body. It's like hitting the brakes on runaway thoughts. He recommends techniques like box breathing, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, as a simple, portable intervention anytime anxiety creeps in. Next up, Trenton introduces body scans. Overthinking is a head game, but your body stores tension like a sponge. A body scan forces you to move your attention away from swirling thoughts and into your physical sensations. By mentally scanning each part of your body, shoulders, chest, stomach, legs, you release pent-up stress and ground yourself in your senses. It's simple but powerful. The more present you are in your body, the less power your mind has to spin out of control. Then there's grounding exercises. Trenton loves these for how quickly they anchor you to the here and now. For example, the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Name 5 things you can see. Name 4 things you can feel. Name 3 things you can hear. Name 2 things you can smell. Name 1 thing you can taste. This forces your brain to stop ruminating and become an active participant in reality. It shifts your focus from abstract worries to tangible experiences. What's refreshing is that Trenton stays grounded, pun intended. He avoids overcomplicating mindfulness or dressing it up with spiritual fluff. His take is direct. Mindfulness is mental training. Just like lifting weights builds muscle, regular mindfulness practice strengthens your ability to stay present, calm, and in control. Trenton explains that mindfulness isn't about suppressing thoughts or pretending stress doesn't exist. It's about not letting thoughts hijack your attention and run the show. When you're present, you create a buffer between stimulus and response. You're less reactive, less anxious, and more intentional. The big takeaway? Overthinking happens when you're lost in what was or what could be. Mindfulness helps you snap back to what is, and that shift alone can short-circuit the anxiety loops. Trenton also encourages readers to integrate these tools into daily life, during commutes, in meetings, before sleep, or even in the middle of stressful conversations. The goal is to make mindfulness second nature, so that when the overthinking kicks in, you have a reliable off switch. Chapter 7. Thought Challenging is where Trenton goes to war with your inner critic, the relentless, nagging voice that turns small concerns into catastrophic disasters. He kicks off by exposing the truth. That inner voice? It lies. A lot. Trenton explains that overthinking often stems from cognitive distortions, habitual ways of thinking that twist reality into something scarier or more negative than it is. These distorted thoughts creep in like uninvited guests, whispering things like, "I'm definitely going to fail. Everyone will think I'm stupid. If I make the wrong choice, my life will be ruined." Sound familiar? Trenton says these thoughts aren't facts. They're mental fiction fueled by anxiety and self-doubt. The heart of this chapter is cognitive restructuring, the process of identifying, challenging, and reshaping distorted thoughts. Trenton teaches you to pause when anxiety flares up and ask yourself critical questions. Is this thought 100% true? What's the evidence for and against it? Am I jumping to conclusions or assuming the worst? What's a more balanced or realistic way to look at this? He dives into common distortions like catastrophizing, blowing things out of proportion, expecting the worst-case scenario, mind reading, assuming you know what others are thinking and usually assuming it's negative, all or nothing thinking, framing things as total success or complete failure with no gray area, fortune-telling, predicting disaster with zero proof. Trenton urges readers to fight back against these automatic distortions like a detective poking holes in a weak case. He introduces a simple but powerful tool, thought journaling. Write down the anxious thought, challenge it with rational questions, and rewrite it with a more balanced alternative. For example, original thought: if I mess up this presentation, I'll get fired. Challenge: have I been fired before for one mistake? How likely is this really? Balanced thought: I might stumble, but it's unlikely to cost me my job. I've handled tougher situations before. Trenton explains that this process helps retrain your brain to spot false alarms before they trigger full-blown anxiety spirals. Over time, thought challenging weakens the grip of your inner critic and boosts your confidence. He also points out that this isn't about blind optimism or toxic positivity. You're not forcing yourself to just think happy thoughts. Instead, you're practicing mental realism, replacing exaggerated fear with grounded truth. Finally, Trenton emphasizes that this skill, like mindfulness, gets stronger with repetition. The more you challenge distorted thoughts, the more automatic it becomes. And when overthinking strikes, you'll be equipped with sharper tools to dismantle it before it spirals. Chapter 8. Action Beats Anxiety delivers a blunt but liberating truth. No amount of overthinking will move you forward, only action will. Trenton pulls no punches here, making it clear that thinking alone can become a trap, a maze where you chase your tail instead of making real progress. He explains that overthinking creates a false sense of productivity. We tell ourselves that by worrying, analyzing every angle, and planning perfectly, we are getting closer to a solution. But in reality, we are just spinning our wheels. The mind loops endlessly, generating stress but no real-world change. Trenton reframes this habit as a stalling tactic born from fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discomfort. So, what's the antidote? Action. Trenton introduces the concept of microactions, tiny, manageable steps that push you toward your goals without overwhelming you. Instead of agonizing over crafting the perfect plan or waiting for the right moment, you take one small step. These microactions could be as simple as sending that email you've been dreading, making a phone call, writing the first sentence of a report, cleaning just one corner of your cluttered room. Trenton emphasizes that momentum is king. Once you take that first microaction, the next step becomes easier. Action silences the doubting voice in your head by proving it wrong. With each move forward, you gather evidence that you can handle discomfort and uncertainty. Your confidence grows and anxiety shrinks. He reminds readers that imperfect action still beats standing still. Waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect strategy only feeds paralysis. Most successful people, Trenton argues, don't wait for flawless conditions. They act, course correct along the way, and learn from their stumbles. He illustrates how small wins snowball into larger victories. Just as anxiety grows when you hesitate, courage grows when you move. By stepping outside of your mind and into the real world, even if it's just a tiny step, you break the loop of paralysis and regain control. Trenton also shares that action itself has a calming effect. When you're engaged in doing something, your mind has less space for anxious spiraling. The physical act of moving forward short-circuits the anxiety loop and shifts your focus from imagined fears to tangible progress. Finally, he drives home the point: clarity comes from action, not from thinking harder. The path becomes clearer as you walk it, not while you sit and analyze it to death. Overthinking thrives in inaction. Action starves it. Trenton's tone is direct but encouraging. He challenges you to stop waiting, stop ruminating, and start doing, even if it's clumsy or awkward. Because once you act, you break the spell of anxiety and set yourself free. Chapter 9. Emotional Mastery is where Trenton teaches us how to stop being hijacked by our emotions and instead learn to work with them. He begins by dismantling the idea that emotions are enemies to be eliminated. Instead, emotions are signals, messengers alerting us to deeper needs, fears, or desires. The problem is not the emotions themselves, but how we respond to them. Trenton highlights how overthinkers tend to be emotional avoiders. We don't want to feel discomfort, fear, or uncertainty, so we overanalyze in an attempt to gain control and sidestep uncomfortable feelings. The irony? Avoidance magnifies emotions rather than neutralizing them. When we resist or suppress an emotion, we trap it inside, allowing it to fester and influence our thoughts in the background. Unacknowledged fear, for example, feeds into endless worst-case scenario thinking. Trenton then introduces key emotional regulation techniques to regain control and stop overthinking from spiraling into anxiety. The first technique is emotional labeling. Simply naming what you feel: I feel anxious, I feel frustrated, or I feel uncertain, helps create distance between you and the emotion. Neuroscience shows that labeling calms the amygdala, your brain's fear center, and activates the rational part of your brain, hello again, system 2. It interrupts the loop where emotion triggers thought, which triggers more emotion, and so on. Next, Trenton talks about breathing techniques, specifically deep diaphragmatic breathing. Taking slow, deep breaths signals safety to your nervous system. It slows your heart rate, reduces stress hormones, and helps you stay grounded rather than swept away by emotional waves. Another key lesson: learning to sit with discomfort. Trenton stresses that you don't have to solve a feeling immediately. Overthinking is often a frantic attempt to eliminate discomfort on the spot. Instead, if you practice sitting with your fear, uncertainty, or sadness without judgment or urgency, you'll notice that the intensity eventually fades on its own. Emotions, like waves, rise and fall if you let them. Trenton also reframes discomfort as a sign of growth, not danger. The instinct to overthink stems from a primal fear of risk, but in modern life, discomfort is often part of pushing past limits and stepping into new opportunities. Whether it's making a big decision or facing social anxiety, emotional discomfort is part of the process, not a sign to overanalyze your way out. He hammers home the final point: overthinking is rooted in fear avoidance. You're not just scared of making the wrong choice. You're scared of how it will feel if things go badly. But once you learn to face emotions head-on and regulate them, fear loses its grip. Your brain no longer needs to go into overdrive to avoid unpleasant feelings, because you've proven to yourself that you can handle them. By mastering emotions, Trenton argues, you cut the fuel supply to the overthinking machine. You become less reactive, more centered, and more decisive. Chapter 10. Rewriting your story is Trenton's call to fundamentally shift how you see yourself, not just how you handle thoughts. He argues that overcoming overthinking isn't just about techniques and hacks. It's about changing your identity. If you walk around saying, "I'm just an overthinker," you're reinforcing a script that shapes your behaviors. Your brain will work to align actions with this internal narrative. Overthinking becomes not just a bad habit, but part of who you think you are. And what does an overthinker do? They hesitate, they second guess, they spin mental wheels in the mud. Trenton pushes back hard on this identity trap. He says it's time to disown the label. Instead, begin crafting a self-image based on decisiveness, clarity, and calm action. You are no longer an overthinker who's fighting uphill. You're someone who can make clear choices, who trusts their ability to handle outcomes, and who doesn't need to ruminate endlessly. He encourages the reader to use positive affirmations not in a cheesy way, but as a tool to rewire self-perception. Say things like, "I am someone who acts confidently. I trust my decisions. I move forward without fear." Repetition of new identity statements creates new neural pathways and makes acting decisively feel more natural over time. Trenton also introduces the idea of behavior reinforcing identity. Every small action you take, whether that's making a quick choice, shutting down a worry spiral, or trusting your gut, sends a message to your brain. See, this is who we are now. Small wins stack up and reshape your narrative. He connects this to cognitive dissonance. When your actions conflict with an overthinker identity, your mind starts to question that label. The more you behave like a confident decision maker, the less believable the old story becomes. This creates momentum toward lasting change. Finally, Trenton urges readers to reflect on where their old narrative came from. Did someone in your past call you indecisive? Did you fail once and internalize it as a personality trait? Often, these stories are outdated and inherited, not chosen. Recognizing that you can choose a different story is empowering. The chapter closes on a powerful note. Overthinking doesn't define you. It's just a habit, a story you've told yourself for too long. You can choose a new one starting today. A story where you think clearly, act boldly, and live with far less mental clutter.